Hi, I'm Mrs. Murdock, and we are going to be filling in part of the organic molecule graphic organizer today. We're just going to do the carbohydrates and lipids because that's what you've studied in class so far. So first of all, let's compare the elements that make up carbohydrates and lipids. So if you remember, an element is like a type of atom, right? So the atoms that you find in carbohydrate molecules are always going to be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And they're always going to be in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. So in a carbohydrate molecule, you're always going to find twice as much hydrogen as you will find carbon or oxygen. But you're also going to notice that you're always going to find as much oxygen in a carbohydrate as you will carbon. So there's a lot of oxygen in carbohydrates. Okay. The monomers of carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. We talked about that last class. I can't fit it, so I'm just going to go saccharides, which means single sugar is literally what mono means. One sugar, or a simple sugar, little sugar, okay? The function of carbohydrates is mostly to store quick energy, right? It's for quick energy. It's the first place your body's going to go when it needs to do something, when a cell needs to do work, or when your muscles need to work to get you away from a bear that's chasing you. It's going to go to the carbs first because they're very energy rich. But there are some other functions. For example, there's a carbohydrate called cellulose that I'll just put in here. Except cellulose, because cellulose is not very easily digestible. It's used for structure in cell walls. Structure of cell walls. So most carbohydrates, all the sugars, the starch, all that kind of stuff, that's good to eat. That's good for energy. But cellulose is an exception that is really fibrous and tough. It's kind of like what you find when you chew on celery. And that's for structure. Okay. Examples. If you notice here, this is a glucose molecule, which is a very prime example of a carbohydrate. It's actually an example of a simple sugar, of a monosaccharide. And glucose I've drawn as hexagons for you before, and this just shows that hexagon, if you see, here's the shape of that hexagon, and at every corner of the hexagon there's a carbon atom. You can see that. And then there's another carbon atom sticking up. And if you actually were to count the carbons and hydrogens and oxygens in this molecule, you would find 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens, a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1 in this very small, simple sugar. Okay? There are other examples that are bigger than glucose, though. We learned about sucrose. Sucrose is not a monosaccharide, it's a disaccharide, and it's made of putting a glucose and a fructose simple sugars together into one disaccharide, and that's what sucrose is. And sucrose, you know, it's what's in your sugar bowl at home. It's what your mom uses when she makes cookies and cakes. Okay, getting bigger than that, there's also something called glycogen, which was in your pear deck. Glycogen is a polysaccharide. It's a very long, large chain of glucoses that you would find in your muscles, a lot of glycogen, because that's a storage molecule for glucose. So it sits in your muscles and waits until there's a need for glucose. And then if your body needs glucose, your body will take that big, long glycogen molecule and snip it into glucose molecules to flood your bloodstream so you have some energy. So glycogen is an example, and so is starch. Starch is a molecule that is just like glycogen, but instead of in animals, you find starch in plants, right? So when you're eating potatoes and that really nice digestible stuff that's in potatoes, that's starch. And a lot of the other things that are in tubers of plants is starch. So that's carbohydrates. Everyone have that filled in? Give me a thumbs up. Very nice. Next, we have lipids. Now lipids, instead of storing quick energy, they store long-term energy. Store long-term energy. So they're kind of the second place your body's going to go when it's looking for energy, when it's looking for food. It's going to go to the glucoses and carbs first, and then it'll go to your fat layers second. Okay? There's also an exception, which I'm going to put here, except something called a phospholipid, which is not for long-term energy. It actually builds cell membranes, right? So a phospholipid builds cell membranes. And remember, cell membranes are not the same as cell walls. Cellulose is in cell walls. Cell membranes are different. And we will talk about that when we talk about cells. Yes. Can I zoom in? I think my camera is in the way. Let me see if I can. Hold on. I think I can do that. Come on. This should be like a... There. Hold on. How's that? That better? Yes? I think that's about all I can do. And then if I do any more, I'm going to lose the... Oh, geez. Don't do that. No. Yeah. I think that's about all I can do. But then I can do that. Okay? That better? Let me put this back over here. Okay. All right. So lipids. The exception is phospholipids that build cell membranes. The other exception, one other exception, which I know Mr. Bouchard really enjoyed talking about last time, is steroids. Steroids, which can act as hormones, right? Like testosterone, which is a steroid. Or there's another one called cholesterol, which stabilizes cell membranes. Stabilizes membranes, and that is cholesterol. Cholesterol. Remember, this is being filmed, so if you don't see it this time, you can see it later. Okay. The elements that make up lipids are actually the same as the ones that make up carbs. C, H, and O, but much less oxygen. There's only a little bit of oxygen in lipids. That's usually how you can tell the difference. Is if there's a lot of oxygen in a molecule with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, you're probably looking at a carb. But if there's not a lot, then you probably have a lipid. Monomers are, there's not really monomers in lipid molecules, but there are subunits of fats. So I'll put that here. Subunits include a glycerol plus fatty acids, and those are the parts that make up fats. So now you know that. Okay, then I'm going to go over here and fill this last box in. Here we go. All right. Okay, so this molecule here, I know this looks really big and complicated. This is a fat molecule. Okay, this is a fat molecule. And it has these long chains of carbons over here. And can you remember from yesterday, is this a fat molecule that's saturated or unsaturated? What do you think? It's saturated. Beautiful job. Yes. And the way you know that is because there are no kinks or bends or double bonds in these long chains over here. So this is a fat molecule that you'd find in an animal because it would be solid at room temperature. Okay? And to get more detail about that, you can look at the Pear Deck, which has much better pictures on it than that. And the Ed Puzzle, too, is really helpful with this. So we have examples include fats and phospholipids, which I mentioned before, which are the special fats in cell membranes, and steroids, which are very weird shaped things that include cholesterol and hormones like testosterone and estrogen. Okay? All right, and that is all I wanted to fill in because we haven't done anything else yet. So we have filled in the parts of the carbohydrates and the lipids just to help you have an organizer in your mind for these molecules. And we're going to learn about proteins today, so we'll be able to fill in the parts about proteins next week. Proteins and then nucleic acids we'll do today and next week. Okay? All right. So I hope that was helpful.